I still remember the sound of the pen scratching across paper, except it wasn't my pen. The document trembled in my hands as I stood in the middle of my living room. The morning light spilled through the curtains, landing on a page I had never seen before, an admission contract for a nursing home. My breath caught when I saw my own name printed neatly across the top. Below it, a signature that looked like mine, but the loops were wrong, the slant unfamiliar. I traced the ink with my finger, and my stomach twisted. Someone had signed me away. I flipped through the pages, the scent of fresh toner clinging to the paper. Near the back, a clause leapt out at me. Property may be liquidated to cover costs. My chest tightened. Liquidated. My house. The same walls that had heard my husband's laughter, the same floors I had scrubbed after midnight shifts, the garden I had coaxed from dry soil, all reduced to a line in a contract. Outside, I heard voices, my son's low murmur, my daughter's sharp whisper. They didn't know I had found the papers. Their footsteps crunched against the gravel, moving closer to the porch. I clutched the folder to my chest, my palms damp, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The doorknob rattled. I shoved the papers under a stack of old photo albums on the coffee table just as the door creaked open. My daughter stepped inside, her smile practiced. "Hi, Mom. We thought we'd stop by to check on you." I forced my own smile, but my eyes darted to the albums hiding what I had just seen. My voice shook as I said, "That's kind of you." She glanced around, her gaze lingering on the coffee table. My pulse hammered. Did she know I had seen it? I sat down slowly, pressing my trembling hands into my lap. The words on the page echoed in my head. Property may be liquidated. My house was not just property. It was the story of my life, brick by brick, scar by scar, and now for the first time I had to face the unthinkable. My own children were plotting to take it from me. The morning after I found the papers, I walked through the house slowly, letting my hand brush across the familiar walls. The scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the faint lavender polish I had rubbed into the furniture the night before. Everything looked ordinary, but nothing felt the same. This house wasn't just shelter. My husband and I had poured decades into it. Layers of paint, long nights fixing the roof, weekends spent pulling weeds in the garden until our backs ached. I could still hear the thud of hammers from the day we finished the porch, his voice saying, "Now it feels like home." There was a time we thought we'd never own it outright. I still remember the day we made the final mortgage payment. He walked out of the bank holding the receipt high in the air, his grin as wide as I'd ever seen it. "It's ours," he said, pressing the slip into my hand like it was treasure. That night, we grilled hot dogs in the backyard and ate off paper plates, laughing like children. My daughter was just a teenager then, rolling her eyes but smiling anyway. My son carved his initials into the oak tree out back, saying he wanted to leave his mark on our land. That memory made the contract I had seen feel even crueler. How could they erase all of that with a single forged signature? Later that week, they came by again. My son carried a bag of groceries, setting it on the counter with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. My daughter moved through the house quickly, as though checking things off an invisible list. She stopped at the hall mirror and adjusted her hair before glancing at me. "Mom, we've been thinking," she began carefully. "This house is awfully big for just one person. Don't you think it's time you had a little more help?" I frowned. "I've managed just fine. You see me every week. I cook, I clean, I mow the lawn." Her smile stayed fixed, but her tone sharpened. "That's true, but it's a lot of work. Wouldn't you rather be somewhere safe with people around in case something happens?" Her words carried a sweetness that felt rehearsed, too polished. My son nodded in agreement, keeping his eyes down. I shrugged it off, choosing silence instead of an argument. In the corner of my vision, I noticed something odd, a card slipping from my daughter's purse as she bent to pick up a dropped apple. She shoved it back quickly, but I caught a glimpse. Embossed letters, the kind used on business cards. Real estate. My chest tightened, but I forced myself not to ask. Not yet. That evening, I stood at the edge of my yard watering the hydrangeas. My neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, leaned over the fence. She was in her 70s too, sharp as a tack, her sun hat tilted against the breeze. "You've been quiet lately," she said, her eyes kind but searching. I smiled faintly. "Just tired." "The kids have been talking about changes." She pursed her lips. "Changes? I see. You trimming hedges, carrying groceries, walking to church. You're more capable than half the people on this street." She tapped the fence post. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words sank into me, both comforting and unsettling. Because if even she could see I was managing fine, then why were my children insisting otherwise? That night, as I set a pot of stew on the stove, I glanced at the photo albums stacked on the coffee table. The same place I had hidden the contract. My hands lingered on the leather covers and I whispered, "They won't take this from me." But even as I said it, I felt the echo of my daughter's careful smile and the glimpse of that business card burning in the back of my mind. The following week, my daughter stopped by alone. She came in with a bright smile, carrying a box of pastries. The scent of sugar and cinnamon filled the kitchen, but it didn't settle my nerves. She set the box down and said, "I thought we could have a treat, just the two of us." We sat at the table, steam rising from the coffee mugs between us. She reached across and patted my hand. "Mom, you've been so strong since Dad passed." "But don't you think you deserve to rest now? A nursing home isn't a punishment. It's comfort, safety." I stiffened. This house is my safety. These walls have kept me for decades. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. "Mom, sometimes you forget things. Like last week, you left the porch light on all night." "That's not forgetting. That's a light bulb." My voice trembled, though I tried to sound steady. She chuckled softly, a sound that carried more condescension than warmth. "You worry too much. We just want what's best for you." My son shifted in his chair, silent. He didn't meet my eyes, only stared at the floor. His jaw tightened, as if he wanted to speak but swallowed the words instead. That flicker of hesitation lodged in my mind. Was he agreeing with her or doubting her? Her words dug under my skin. Best for me or best for you? When she went to the bathroom, I felt my heart pound against my ribs. Her handbag was on the chair, half zipped, papers peeking out. My fingers itched. I stood, every step heavy on the hardwood floor. The smell of cinnamon lingered, oddly sweet against the sour taste of fear rising in my mouth. I reached for the bag, pulled the zipper slowly. The faint crinkle of paper filled the air. I slid one document halfway out. It bore the letterhead of a real estate office. Just then, the toilet flushed. My blood froze. I shoved the paper back, zipped the bag, and darted to the sink, pretending to rinse my cup. She emerged, her eyes flicking to the chair. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between us. Then she smiled again, but her voice carried a sharp undertone. "Looking for something, Mom?" I forced a laugh. "Just cleaning up." She set her bag on her lap this time, her hand resting protectively over it. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. Too tightly, her perfume pressing into my clothes. She whispered, "One day you'll thank us for making the hard choices." The door closed behind her, leaving the house too quiet. I sat back at the table, staring at the untouched pastries. The cinnamon scent now made me nauseous. I thought of my husband, of the mortgage we fought to pay, of the night he carved our initials into the porch post. My daughter had grown up under this roof, had once called it our castle. Now she wanted to lock me away and sell it. I pressed my hands against the cool wood of the table, whispering to myself, "Not yet. Not while I can still fight." That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls of the house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I sat at the kitchen table with only the hum of the refrigerator behind me. In front of me lay a shoebox filled with papers I had avoided since the funeral, insurance receipts, old tax returns, my husband's careful notes. I began digging through, my fingers trembling as I unfolded each page. The smell of dust and ink clung to my hands. In between a stack of utility bills, I found the first crack of light, a fax cover sheet from a nursing home dated just 2 weeks ago. My name typed neatly in the admitting resident line. I hadn't signed it, hadn't even seen it. My throat tightened. I set the paper aside, forcing myself to keep going. A second link surfaced when I opened my daughter's laptop bag she had carelessly left behind last Sunday. My hands shook as I slid out a folder marked Property. Inside was a draft of a real estate listing. Photos of my very own kitchen, my backyard garden, even the oak tree with my son's carved initials. At the top of the page, coming soon, spacious family home. At the cafe that afternoon, Mrs. Wilson overheard 2 men talking near the counter. "That place on Oak Street's practically sold," one of them bragged. "Owners being moved out, done deal." When she told me, my stomach dropped. They were already speaking as though I were gone. I gasped, covering my mouth, afraid the neighbors might hear me through the walls. My house had already been photographed, cataloged, prepared for strangers to pick apart. I nearly dropped the papers when I heard footsteps outside the window. Peeking through the curtain, I saw Mrs. Wilson walking her dog, her flashlight beam sweeping across the sidewalk. I hurried to hide the folder back in the bag, but in my rush, I left the cover sheet of the fax lying on the table. The next morning, she knocked on my door holding that very sheet in her hand. My cheeks flushed hot. "I must have dropped it," I stammered. She studied the page, her voice low. "I knew something wasn't right. Your daughter asked me last week if I'd be willing to check in on you once you were moved." She shook her head. I didn't understand then. Now I do. Tears burned my eyes. "They're planning it, aren't they?" Mrs. Wilson squeezed my hand. "Yes, but you're not crazy and you're not alone." Her words steadied me, but the weight of betrayal pressed even harder. Later that afternoon, I returned to the shoebox and found a slip of paper wedged between grocery receipts. My husband's handwriting filled the back. "House secured. Mortgage cleared. Keep the home safe." The letters blurred through my tears. His voice, calm and steady, seemed to echo in the room. He had trusted me to protect what we built, and now the very children we raised were trying to sell it. But I made a mistake. In my haste, I forgot to put the shoebox back under the bed. When my son stopped by unexpectedly that evening, his eyes darted to the open box on the table. "What's all this, Mom?" he asked lightly, though his tone was tight. "Just old papers," I said, covering the fax with a stack of envelopes. He smiled too quickly, picking up a photo of himself as a boy standing beside the oak tree. "You shouldn't stress yourself digging through these. It's not good for your heart." I nodded, hiding the tremor in my hands. But inside, I knew he had seen enough. The game of pretense was over. That night, as I tucked the shoebox deep into the closet, I whispered to the empty house, "I have proof now. More than enough. And I will not be erased." That night, I sat in the living room with the shoebox beside me. The house was dark except for the glow of the lamp on the mantel, lighting the photograph of my children when they were small. Their smiles were wide, their arms wrapped around each other, hair messy from playing in the yard. I stared at that picture until my vision blurred. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in the kitchen 25 years ago. My daughter had been 10, standing on a chair in her socks, waving a wooden spoon like a wand. "Mom, this house is my castle," she had declared, her voice ringing with certainty. My son had groaned, "Then I get the tree fort." Their laughter had filled the room, mingling with the smell of pancakes sizzling on the stove. My husband had winked at me, his voice low. We gave them a kingdom. I remembered, too, the day we carried the last mortgage slip out of the bank. My daughter skipped ahead on the sidewalk, clutching the receipt like treasure. "We're rich now, right, Mom?" she laughed. My husband kissed my forehead and whispered, "No, we're free." The memory pressed against my chest like a bruise, because the little girl who had once called this house her castle was now planning to sell it. Later that week, my daughter returned, this time alone. She came without groceries, without pastries, just her purse slung tightly over her shoulder. She sat across from me, her hands twisting together. For the first time, she didn't start with a smile. "Mom," she said softly, "you don't understand how hard this has been for us. The bills, the upkeep. You think we don't care, but we do. We can't keep doing this." I swallowed. "Doing what?" "Worrying about you every night. Wondering if you'll fall or forget to lock the door or..." Her voice cracked. "We're scared. And yes, the house is too much. You don't see how it weighs on us." Her words struck differently than before. They weren't sharp or mocking. They trembled with something closer to fear. For the first time, I saw not just betrayal, but exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that settles in when someone feels cornered. I wanted to argue, to shout that she had forged my name, plotted behind my back. Instead, I let silence fill the room. She shifted, uneasy, her fingers tightening on her purse strap. Finally, she whispered, "I don't want to lose you, Mom. But I also don't want to drown. Maybe I handled things wrong. But I thought if we moved you, at least we could breathe again." The confession cracked something inside me. Not proof, not the betrayal, but the image of her as a pure villain. I saw instead a daughter who was afraid, who convinced herself she was doing the right thing, even if it meant crushing me in the process. I took a slow breath. Your father built this house with his hands. He wanted me safe here. That was his promise. She blinked, and for a moment I thought I saw shame flicker across her face. Then she stood quickly, murmuring about being late for an appointment, and left without looking back. The door shut, and the silence that followed was heavy, but it was different than before. It wasn't emptiness, it was clarity. I understood now. I wasn't just fighting greed. I was fighting fear, tangled with love, twisted into something unrecognizable, and that made the battle even harder. A few days later, I began noticing the shift. It started small, an odd glance at the market, a whispered question after church. Then one afternoon, Mrs. Wilson knocked on my door, holding her phone. "Look at this," she said, her lips pressed thin. On the neighborhood forum, a post written by my daughter glowed on the screen. "My mother has been struggling with memory since Dad passed. We're doing our best to keep her safe, but please don't confuse her with unnecessary talk about the house. It only upsets her." My stomach clenched. Memory? Struggling? She had turned concern into a weapon, sowing doubt before I could speak. That Sunday, the church felt colder. People hugged me longer than usual, their questions laced with pity. "Are you managing your bills okay?" "Do you remember to take your pills, dear?" I smiled and nodded, but each word scraped against my dignity. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a screenshot from a friend. In the group chat, a neighbor had written, "She left her stove on again, nearly burned the place down." It wasn't true. I hadn't cooked that night at all. But the lie spread quickly, each message another crack in the foundation of my reputation. After service, Pastor Lee invited me to his office. His voice was calm, careful. "I've heard things. Your daughter says she's worried about you. Tell me, what's true?" I laid the folder on his desk. Fact sheet, real estate draft, my husband's note, his brows knit tighter with every page. "These aren't misunderstandings," he said quietly. "They're actions." He folded his hands. "I can mediate. Invite her here. Let us speak together. Perhaps it will cool the fire for a moment." I wanted to believe that a conversation in God's house could stop what was already rolling downhill. I agreed. But 2 days later, a new storm arrived. I found a folded paper wedged in my front door. Notice of vacate, 30 days, immediate contact required. The heading was bold, official looking. My knees went weak. I sat on the porch step, the wood warm beneath me, staring at the words until they blurred. Hands shaking, I called the number listed. A brisk woman answered. "Oh no, ma'am, that notice doesn't apply to you." "Wrong address. Courier mistake." Please discard it." Relief hit me hard, leaving me dizzy. But beneath it, dread grew stronger. I had just felt how easy it would be to lose everything with one piece of paper. That night, I opened the old photo album again. My son at graduation, my daughter in her prom dress, my husband holding them both close. I traced their smiles with trembling fingers. This house had carried our life, and now it was at risk of being sold like a commodity. The next morning, there was a knock. A woman stood at the door, clipboard in hand, badge pinned to her sweater. County Social Services. "Good morning, ma'am," she said kindly. "We received a request to evaluate your living situation. Just routine. May I come in?" Her eyes swept the tidy kitchen, the neatly stacked dishes, the trimmed garden visible through the window. She asked me questions, how I managed meals, bills, medication. I answered calmly, pointing to the organized pill box, the balanced checkbook on the counter. Her pen scratched the paper briskly. "Risk factors," she murmured, circling boxes. "Lives alone. Age 70 plus. Large property." Each checkmark felt like another step toward erasing me. I gripped the armrest tightly until my knuckles ached. When she left, she smiled. "You're doing well." "More than well." "I'll write that in my report." I stood at the doorway long after her car drove off, the sun warming my face. It was a small victory, a breath of validation, but I knew the war wasn't over. 2 other neighbors came that morning, standing quietly on my porch. "We've lived here 30 years, one said. "We know you." "You're not confused. If anyone asks, we'll tell them the truth." Their presence felt like a wall, thin but firm, standing between me and the lies. That afternoon, Mrs. Wilson stopped by again, carrying a paper bag of oranges. "I overheard at the salon," she whispered. "Your daughter told someone you'd be moving out by summer. Said the house was practically theirs." The bag shook in my hands. I looked at the oranges, bright and round, symbols of generosity from someone who had no stake in this except truth. That evening, the lawyer called. His tone was steady, factual. "We've located your husband's will and mortgage records. Everything confirms the property is yours, secured. I've scheduled a review. Your children have been notified," I thanked him, though my heart pounded. The notice of vacate, the smear, the social worker, it all led here. They would be forced to face the documents, to look at the proof, with no more room for excuses. As I set the phone down, the house felt both heavy and alive. Heavy with betrayal, alive with the possibility of justice. The silence around me was no longer empty. It hummed with preparation, like a storm gathering strength. The courthouse smelled faintly of rain and old wood. I sat at the long table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the folder of documents pressed against my side like a shield. Across from me, my daughter and son whispered with their attorney, their heads bent together. They looked so much like children sharing secrets in the schoolyard that, for a moment, I almost forgot why we were here. The judge entered, his gavel striking once. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. We all rose, then sat again as the proceedings began. My attorney stood, sliding the folder onto the polished table. He opened it slowly, each page deliberate. The certified will, the cleared mortgage papers, the notarized statement of ownership. The notary's seal glinted under the fluorescent light. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "these documents prove that my client is the rightful owner of her home. She has no intention of moving into a nursing facility, nor should she be coerced to do so." My daughter's attorney rose smoothly. Her tone was soft, almost sympathetic. "We have concerns, Your Honor. Our clients worry about their mother's well-being. She has shown signs of forgetfulness. They only wish to protect her. Protect." The word cut like glass. The judge turned to me. "Would you like to respond?" I rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. My voice shook at first, then steadied. This house is not just a building. My husband and I built our lives inside those walls. We paid every cent of that mortgage, and he left it to me in his will. I cook in that kitchen, I garden in that yard. I am not confused, and I am not incapable. What confuses me is how my own children could sign my name without asking and plan to sell what was never theirs. Gasps murmured through the courtroom. My son shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. My daughter gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking, "you don't understand. We were trying to save you from yourself. From being alone," I stared at her. "By locking me away? By selling my home?" Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at the judge, then back at me. "I can't keep doing this." Every phone call, every late-night worry, every bill, it's been crushing me. I thought if I moved you, if we sold the house, at least we could all breathe. I didn't want to lose you, but I didn't want to drown either. Her words cracked the air open. For the first time, I saw not only betrayal, but fear. Raw, desperate fear etched into her face. She wasn't only greedy, she was exhausted, cornered by her own sense of burden. I felt the burn of tears in my own eyes. "You should have told me. We could have faced that fear together, but instead you made me feel like a stranger in my own home." Silence fell. Even her attorney hesitated, as though unsure how to proceed. Mrs. Wilson, sitting in the witness row, stood when called. She held up the fact sheet she had found, her voice steady. "I've known this woman for 20 years. She remembers every birthday, every holiday, every bill. She is not confused. What she is betrayed." The judge leaned forward, scanning the documents once more. "The will is clear. The mortgage is paid. The ownership is beyond dispute." He set the papers down and looked directly at my children. "You may be worried for your mother, but worry does not give you the right to forge her name or sell her property." The gavel struck, final and sharp. "This court recognizes her full ownership. Proceedings for sale are null." Before she broke down, my son finally stood. His voice cracked. "I wanted to stop this. I saw the papers, I knew it was wrong, but I stayed silent. I didn't want to fight my sister. And I failed you, Mom." His confession landed like another gavel, quieter but just as heavy. My daughter sank into her chair, her shoulders shaking. My son pressed a hand to his face, his jaw tight. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then my daughter whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Dad." The sound of it pierced deeper than any argument. As the courtroom emptied, Pastor Lee touched my shoulder gently. "Justice is done," he said. His voice carried both relief and sadness. But inside, my heart ached. Justice had come, yes. The house was safe. But the cost was carved into the faces of my children, who now looked smaller, broken in ways I didn't know how to mend. Outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement shone like dark glass under the afternoon sun. I held the folder close to my chest, the seal of my husband's will pressing into my palm. Proof had saved me. And yet, as I stepped into the silver light, I realized the real battle was not just about property. It was about the fragile thread of love stretched thin between mother and child, a thread that might never be whole again. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a heavy thud, but the weight pressing on my chest began to lift. In my hands was a stamped order, confirming what I had always known. The house was mine. My name alone. The papers were thin, just a few sheets, yet they carried the weight of decades, every mortgage payment, every repair, every sacrifice. Outside, the air was sharp and clean, the last of the rain still glittering on the steps. Mrs. Wilson slipped her arm through mine. "You did it," she said softly. "He would be proud." I pressed the folder tighter against my chest. I only wish he had been here to see it. The days that followed were filled with both relief and aftermath. The lawyer called to confirm the fraudulent documents had been voided. "No sale can proceed without your consent," he said. "The county has been notified. If anything surfaces again, you'll have the full record to stop it." His voice was steady, professional, but I heard the respect beneath it. At church the next Sunday, the sanctuary felt warmer. Neighbors shook my hand, some apologizing quietly for believing the rumors. Pastor Lee wove my story into his sermon, not by name but in spirit. The dignity of the elder is not a burden, it is a legacy. Protecting it is our duty. I sat in the front pew, my head bowed, tears tracing silent lines down my cheeks. When he finished, the congregation rose, applause breaking the stillness. A chorus of voices, neighbors, friends, even strangers, echoed through the sanctuary. Protect dignity. For the first time, the smear was drowned not by silence but by community. After the service, children from the Sunday school came running with drawings. One little girl handed me a picture of a small house with flowers blooming in the yard. "This is yours," she said proudly. "It's safe." The symbolic weight of that moment struck me harder than the judge's gavel. Proof on paper had saved the house, but the innocence of a child's drawing restored something deeper, my sense of belonging. My daughter didn't come to church that week, nor the week after. My son avoided my calls, but one evening as I sat on the porch, the sky painted in gold and lavender, I saw her car pull into the drive. She stepped out slowly, her face pale in the fading light. She didn't carry documents or rehearsed words this time. She carried a small box. Inside were photographs, family trips, birthday parties, holidays long gone. She placed the box on the porch rail, her eyes glistening. "I can't change what I did," she whispered, "but I wanted you to have these." "Maybe they'll remind you of better days," I didn't answer. I only placed my hand on the box, feeling the cool cardboard, the weight of memory inside. She lingered for a moment, then turned and left. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a gesture, a crack in the wall between us. Mrs. Wilson's arc reached its own closure. She became more than a neighbor. She became a guardian. She visited often, bringing groceries or sitting with me on the porch as the cicadas hummed in the trees. "This house," she said one evening, sipping tea, "is a fortress. Not just of wood and stone, but of the truth you defended." Even the social worker returned briefly, clipboard in hand. "Just a follow-up," she said with a smile. She looked around at the tidy home, the stacked bills marked "paid," the steady presence of Mrs. Wilson at my side. "I'll close this case," she added. "You don't need monitoring. You need respect." The legal process ended formally with a letter in the mail, the probate court's certification of ownership, embossed with a seal that gleamed under the lamp. I slipped it into a frame and set it beside my husband's photo. It wasn't just paper. It was a promise, fulfilled. One evening, I opened the front door wide and invited the neighborhood children to sit on the porch steps. I read them stories while the fireflies blinked in the yard. Their laughter filled the twilight, spilling into the rooms of the house like sunlight. It was my way of keeping the house alive, not as a relic, but as a legacy shared. As the last child ran off, waving goodnight, I closed the door softly and leaned against it. The house was still mine, but more than that, my dignity was intact. The battle had been brutal, the betrayal deep, but I had not been erased. The house is quiet again. The papers are framed, the seals shining faintly in the lamplight, but they cannot erase the ache that lingers in my chest. I walk from room to room, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs. This place has carried both laughter and sorrow, and now it carries the weight of survival. I pause at the mantel where my husband's photo rests beside the court order. His steady eyes meet mine from the frame. "I kept it safe," I whisper. "I kept us safe." For the first time in months, I feel his promise and mine finally align. Yet when I close my eyes, I see my daughter's face on the courthouse bench, her shoulders hunched, her voice breaking. I hear her words, I didn't want to drown. Betrayal cut deep, but underneath it was fear, tangled with love, twisted into something unrecognizable. That truth haunts me even now. I step onto the porch as dusk settles, the cicadas humming their chorus. Children's chalk drawings still brighten the walkway. Flowers, castles, suns with wide smiles. One picture shows a small house, a flag flying from its roof. My granddaughter had drawn it the day before, handing me the crayon picture proudly. "Grandma, it's still your castle," she said. Her words echo now, soft but strong, weaving together past and present. Once my daughter had called this house her castle. Now it is my granddaughter's voice that carries the legacy forward. I thought of that day at the bank, her small hands holding the receipt high. That slip of paper had meant freedom. This slip of paper, today's court order, meant survival. Both were proof that this home was never just walls, but a promise. I sink into the porch chair, letting the cool evening air wash over me. I feel both sorrow and strength. Sorrow for what was lost between me and my children, strength for what I managed to preserve. Maybe forgiveness will come. Maybe it won't. The future remains uncertain, as life always is. But one truth shines clear. Dignity is not something you surrender, even to those you love most. I look out at the street where neighbors wave as they pass, where community has stepped in when family faltered, and I wonder aloud, what makes a family real? Is it blood? Or is it love and the courage to protect each other's dignity? The night deepens, the stars flicker overhead, and I sit with that question, leaving its answer to those who listen.